In this advanced tech world, DevOps is a buzzword. They can be DevOps architects, operational engineers, DevOps engineers, depending on the various DevOps skills. Most of the organizations are now hiring DevOps professionals to make their projects successful and profitable. The demand is basically growing very rapidly, and you must take advantage of it. Hi everyone, this is Kavya from Edureka, and in this session we will discuss the top 10 DevOps skills or tools to learn. Before we begin, I'm going to brief you all about the agenda in today's session. Firstly, we will understand what is DevOps. Then we will move on to the main agenda of this session and discuss the top 10 DevOps skills to learn. Finally, we'll conclude the session by understanding the DevOps learning path. I hope you all are clear about what we will be addressing today. Without much ado, let's get started. Introduction to DevOps. So firstly, let us understand what is DevOps. In the IT industry, there are two different entities, that is the development team and the operation teams. The DevOps approach simply brings development and operations together with the goal of streamlining application building and deployment into an automated process that takes into account the entire delivery chain. Now, under the DevOps model, application delivery is a continual workflow that essentially loops back onto itself to support a continuous process. You can see this on the screen. You obviously still have specific tasks that must be carried out, but they're performed as an integrated whole that requires all participants to work together to keep the flow moving. So at its core, you could say that DevOps is about creating a culture of collaboration and transparency that fosters open communication across all teams involved in application delivery. The DevOps approach seeks to break down silos and encourage a sense of shared responsibility, creating an environment in which everyone works together to build and deploy software more effectively than with traditional methodologies. All the discussions around DevOps often focus on coding and deploying the application. A successful DevOps effort also requires that quality assurance, security, and business considerations be fully integrated into the process flow. To this end, DevOps is often described in terms of the CAMS model, that is culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. Together, these four principles define the operational foundation on which DevOps is built. Culture basically allows a transparent and collaborative environment that encourages communication and cooperation among participants, with processes and tools in place to support these efforts. On the other hand, the ongoing automation of repeatable and time-consuming tasks to create a unified workflow throughout the application delivery process. Measurement is the ability to monitor and track the various tasks performed throughout the application delivery process in order to correct and improve the DevOps workflow. Finally, the ongoing sharing of knowledge, resources, and tools among all individuals participating in the DevOps workflow is important. Let's move on to the main agenda of today, that is the top 10 DevOps skills to learn. The first and the most important skill for you to acquire is Linux fundamentals. Linux is a free open source operating system released under the GNU General Public License. So basically, an operating system is simply a software that directly manages a system's hardware and resources like CPU, memory, and storage. The operating system usually sits between applications and hardware and makes the connections between all of your software and the physical resources that you work on. In Linux, anyone can run, study, modify, and redistribute the source code or even sell copies of their modified code as long as they do so under the same license. Think about an operating system like a car engine. An engine can run on its own, but it becomes a functional car when it's connected with a transmission, axles, and wheels. Without the engine running properly, the rest of the car simply won't work. Many DevOps tools in the configuration management space like Chef, Ansible, Puppet, etc. have their architecture based on Linux master nodes. These tools help in provisioning and managing infrastructure automatically with the help of any scripting language like Ruby, Python. So Linux fundamentals and scripting's know-how is a must to get started with infrastructure automation, which is a key concept in DevOps. The next most important skill is source code management. Source code management is used to track modifications to a code repository. It tracks a running history of changes to a code base and helps resolve conflicts when merging updates from multiple contributors. Source code management is also synonymous with version control. As software projects grow in lines of code and contributor headcount, the cost of communication overhead and management complexity also grows. So here source code management comes to the rescue. It is a critical tool that helps to elevate the organizational strain of growing development costs. For example, when multiple developers are working within a shared code base, it is a common occurrence to make edits to a shared piece of code. Separate developers may be working on a seemingly isolated feature. However, this feature may use a shared code model. Therefore, developer 1 working on feature 1 could make some edits and find out later that developer 2 working on feature 2 has some conflicting edits. Source code management brought version control safeguards to prevent loss of work due to conflict overwriting. By far, the most widely used modern version control system in the world today is Git. Git works by tracking changes from each individual developer and identifying areas of conflict and preventing overwrites. Source code management will then communicate these points of conflict back to the developers so that they can safely review and address. Git is an example of a distributed version control system. In addition to this, Git has been designed with performance, security, and flexibility in mind. Moving to the third most important skill is the continuous integration and continuous delivery. A better understanding of the continuous integration and continuous delivery approaches helps to deliver a high-quality product at a faster pace to the clients. Continuous integration is one of the best practices in DevOps community, where whenever a developer finishes a functionality or a user story, he or she integrates the new code with the existing code base continuously. This basically helps to save a lot of time spent during the integration phase of the project. So this practice helps to detect integration issues in the early stages itself, thus making the life of the developer much easier. Continuous delivery, on the other hand, comes as an extension to continuous integration, where the newly integrated code is made ready for deployment automatically without or minimum human intervention. There are two important tools you could use to practice continuous integration and continuous delivery. They are Docker and Jenkins. Jenkins is an open source tool critical for building CI/CD pipelines. It provides flexibility and many integrations. Other tools that are critical to CI/CD have Jenkins plugins. This also includes version control. Docker, on the other hand, is simply a containerization tool. Moving on to the fourth skill is infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code is the management of infrastructure, that is networks, virtual machines, load balancers, and connection topology in a descriptive model using the same versioning as DevOps team uses for source code. Terraform, Ansible, and Chef are some popular infrastructure as code tools. So infrastructure as code enables DevOps teams to test applications in production-like environments early in the development cycle. These teams expect to provision multiple test environments reliably and on demand. Infrastructure represented as code can also be validated and tested to prevent common deployment issues. Most importantly, all these operations are traceable through the version control system, which ensures the removal of decades-old works fine on my computer problem where the code that worked in testing does not work in production. Infrastructure as code ensures continuity as all the environments are provisioned and configured automatically with no room for human error, which greatly speeds up and simplifies the software development and infrastructure operations. For a DevOps engineer, some knowledge of automation tools is extremely important. Automation is key because it allows to reduce the human component, which fosters speed, increases accuracy, improves consistency, and reliability while cutting the amount of errors. Eventually, this results in more rapid and swift, higher quality delivery of value to customers. A wide variety of DevOps tools are available in the market as the prerequisites of every specific DevOps requirement. Deciding on the right set of tools is an ever-growing challenge for the stakeholders. Furthermore, we recommend that a single tool may not be a full-fledged solution to a DevOps adoption. The most popular DevOps tools currently in the market are Puppet, Docker, and Jenkins. Moving on to the next skill is continuous testing. Continuous testing is a way to boost, speed up, and support the DevOps CI/CD pipelines. It includes the practices, processes, and tools of testing early, testing often, testing everywhere, and automation. For example, whenever a developer checks the code in the source code server like Jenkins, automated set of unit tests are executed in the continuous process. If the tests fail, the build is rejected and the developer is notified. If the build passes the test, it is then deployed to performance, quality assurance servers for exhaustive functional and load tests. The tests are run in parallel, and if these tests pass, the software is eventually deployed into production. The most popular tool for continuous testing is Selenium. It is a suite of different open source software tools used for automated software testing of web applications across various browsers or platforms. Most often used to create robust browser-based regression automation suites and tests, Selenium, like Jenkins, has a rich repository of open source tools that are useful for different kinds of automation problems. With support for programming languages like C#, Java, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, .NET, etc., Selenium can be used to write automation scripts that run against most modern web browsers. The next most important skill is containerization. It is basically the process of packaging an application along with its required libraries, frameworks, and configuration files together so that it can run in various computing environments effectively. In simpler terms, containerization is the encapsulation of an application and its required environment. Docker is a platform that provides containerization. It basically allows for packaging of an application and its dependencies into a container, thereby helping ease the development and accelerate the deployment of the software. Containers solve application conflicts between different environments. Indirectly, containers in Docker bring developers and IT operations closer together, making it easier for them to collaborate effectively. Adopting the container workflow provides many customers with the DevOps continuity they have sought but previously had to implement via more complex configuration for release and build pipelines. Containers basically simplify the build or test or deploy pipelines in DevOps. Cloud service knowledge. With time, competition in the software development industry is rapidly increasing, following which all the companies are now trying their best to sophisticate the process. And for this, they are now hugely using various cloud services. So you need to obtain knowledge about different cloud platforms and their services. This is something very important for both DevOps and cloud architect engineers. Some of the major cloud services are Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and IBM. Now let me tell you why the cloud is so important in DevOps. The centralized nature of cloud computing provides DevOps automation with a standard and centralized platform for testing, deployment, and production. In the past, the distributed nature of some enterprise systems did not fit in well with centralized software deployment. Using a cloud platform solves many issues with distributed complexity. The next reason is that DevOps automation is becoming cloud-centric. Most public and private cloud computing providers support DevOps systematically on the platform, including continuous integration and continuous development tools. This tight integration lowers the cost associated with on-premise DevOps automation technology and provides centralized governance and control for a sound DevOps process. Many developers who enter into the process find out that governance keeps them out of trouble, and it's eventually easier to control this centrally via the cloud versus attempting to bring departments under control. The next most important reason is that cloud-based DevOps lessens the need to account for resources leveraged. Clouds leverage usage-based accounting, which tracks the use of resources by application, developer, user, data, etc. Traditional systems typically do not provide this service. When leveraging cloud-based resources, it is much easier to track costs of development resources and eventually make adjustments as needed. Security skills is really important too. DevOps security refers to the discipline and practice of safeguarding the entire DevOps environment, the strategies, policies, processes, and technology. Security should be built into every part of the DevOps lifecycle, including inception, design, build, test, release, support, maintenance, and other things. Today, this type of baked-in DevOps security is often called as DevSecOps, which aims to improve security through improved collaboration and shared responsibility that overlays the entire DevOps workflow. Whether you call it DevOps or DevSecOps, it has always been ideal to include security as an integral part of the entire application lifecycle. It is important to know that DevSecOps is about built-in security, not security that functions as a perimeter around applications and data. Now, if the security remains at the end of the development pipeline, organizations adopting DevOps can find themselves back to the long development cycles they were trying to avoid in the first place. The last most important practice that you have to skill is in continuous monitoring. It refers to the process and technology required to incorporate monitoring across each phase of your DevOps and IT operations life cycles. It helps to continuously ensure the health, performance, and reliability of your application and infrastructure as it moves from development to production. There are several tools used for this practice, like Nagios, which is a free to use open source software tool for continuous monitoring. It basically helps you to monitor systems, networks, and infrastructure. It is used for continuous monitoring of systems, applications, servers, and business processes in a DevOps culture. Sensui is another open source monitoring tool developed for cloud environments, easily deployable through Chef and Puppet. New Relic, on the other hand, supports monitoring of PHP, Ruby, Java, Node.js, among other applications, gives insights about real-time performance of running applications. Moving on to the next part of the session is DevOps Learning Path. DevOps training certification helps anyone who aspires to make a career as a DevOps engineer. Certifications are available from Amazon Web Services, Red Hat, Microsoft Academy, DevOps Institute, Edureka, etc. Edureka's DevOps Engineer Master's program will make you proficient in DevOps principles like continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous monitoring, and continuous delivery using tools like Puppet, Nagios, Chef, Docker, Git, and Jenkins. So what are you waiting for? Get yourself enrolled today. With this, we come to the end of today's session. I hope you had a great time. Until next time, thank you.